Hello future ancient historians, and welcome to your next video lesson on ancient Greek religion. So can you write down the title and the aim, and then to start with it's just a thinking task. We need to think about, if we're looking at ancient religions, let's start by thinking about what we know, modern religions. So what I want you to think about before you carry on is think about their purpose. What purpose do religions serve for people? Think about how religions are practiced, how religion is used to explain the world, and anything else that you think is possibly relevant. We need to look at what modern religions do before we start looking at ancient religions, and particularly Greek religion. So if we take our starting point with ancient religions, almost all ancient religions were polytheist. There are some exceptions, the most obvious one being Zoroastrianism, which was the religion followed by the Persian Empire, but predominantly most ancient religions were polytheist, meaning they had more than one god. Greek religion became the kind of dominant mythology, if not fully practiced religion, in the ancient Mediterranean. This is partly because they were one of the first, obviously except the Egyptians, to kind of formalise and record their mythology, their narratives and their religions, but also because, unlike the Egyptians, they travelled extensively. So the Greek religion becomes the basis for a lot of the other religions we'll study. It does have close similarities to other ancient religions of the Mediterranean region. Obviously the Romans adopted Greek mythology outright, but if you look at all kind of ancient religions, they all have similar kind of structures. So there's usually a king of the gods, there's a god of the afterlife or the underworld, there's a god of the sun, there's a goddess usually of fertility. So there are very common patterns, and usually the way ancient religions worked quite well together was they took the similar principles and just gave them different names. The first real recording of Greek religion in any kind of, particularly in a humanized form, the idea of gods being kind of almost human beings but mythical, obviously, is in a book by Hesiod called Theogony, and this was written in 750 BC. And again, like a lot of ancient religions, Greek religion is massively steeped in mythology, and by this we mean that there are obviously backstories to how the gods came into being, tales of how they related to each other, what kind of things they get up to, what kind of things do they like, and they're also different. Interesting with Greek religion, there's different generations of gods. So for example, you've got Chaos as the original form, then we get the Titans, and then the Olympians, and then lots and lots of demigods. And like other religions, Greek religion absolutely has a creation myth. And obviously, as you can see on the slide, it says, Zeus is responsible for fathering a lot of demigods. So the first task I want you to do, you're going to need the document that's called Creation, and we're going to look at the Greek idea of the creation myth. So first thing I want you to do, I'll leave this obviously on the screen, pause this video while you're doing the task so you've got the instructions in front of you. First thing you need to do is order the statements so that they tell the Greek story of creation in chronological order. Now, a lot of it is largely in order because I'm aware that this is going to be bizarre and unusual and confusing to some of you, so do have a think, but it's important that you follow the story through. Then I want you to summarise the story of Greek creation in no more than 100 words, so nice and short and sweet. But then we've got some more challenging questions to answer. So the first one is, what can we learn from this story about the character of Greek gods, Titans, Olympians and so on? What can we tell about their character? And then if we think specifically then, can we think of any similarities between the kind of Greek creation myth and other kind of similar ideas about creation or the universe or the creation of the world. So pause this video while you do this task so the instructions are nicely on the board. So again, you may need to pause this bit of the video just to check your work. I'm not going to make you submit your chronology of events, but here we have the answers. This is the order that the cards or the parts of the story should have been in. So just take a minute, pause the video and check, did you get it in the right order? Are some things in the wrong place and need rearranging? Or did you just simply watch the video through and then go, oh look, there's the answers. So check what you've done now. So the next aspect we need to look at when we look at Greek religion, obviously we've looked at the mythology and the gods and so on. We need to look at how this religion was practiced. And one very big difference between modern religions and ancient religions, and particularly Greek religion, is that these ancient religions are largely what we'd call contractual. It's not the case that you please your god by living by certain standards and doing nice things, and then if you live a good life you'll go to whatever afterlife. Ancient religions were far more contractual. They relied on a quid pro quo basis, and almost that the gods would almost be duty bound to assist you if you asked for their help. So there's two ways of looking at Greek religion particularly. The first is this idea that yes, you absolutely had to keep the gods happy. Most cities would follow a particular god primarily, so obviously Athens would follow Athena, various different cities would follow other gods as well as the rest of them. But you needed to keep the gods happy, you needed to keep them pleased, otherwise terrible things would be done to you. So there are different ways you do this. So temples are an obvious one. Greece is famous for its temples, like the one that you can see there. Festivals, ways of celebrating actions of the gods or a particular part of the god's backstory or so on. Offerings and sacrifices, these were really, really important. Obviously not human sacrifices, don't go down that route. There's no evidence that this was ever the case. Animal sacrifices primarily, and for the bigger festivals where sacrifices were done, a bull was usually the main sacrificial animal. And this leads nicely into the idea of feasts, because handily for the Greeks, according to their mythology, when you sacrificed the animal, the gods only really wanted the thigh bone of the animal, but they also really liked the smell of cooking meat, and those were the two things that would make the gods happiest. So once you've sacrificed your bull and presented the thigh bone to the altar and you're starting to roast the rest of it, well, the obvious question is, well, what do you do once you've done that? What do you do with this dead cow with a bit of its leg missing? And the obvious solution is you eat it. So this is where we get this idea of feasting. Feasting in Greece particularly will also be accompanied by processions, dancing, music, lots and lots of heavy drinking, all manner of shenanigans and drama, as you can see in that little vase painting just below the temple. So there were lots and lots of ways in which the Greeks tried to keep their gods permanently happy, or just less angry, because they were pretty angry. But the other aspect of it was a far more private, individual and personal way of doing this. Back to this idea of being contractual. So you could make small offerings or offer up your prayers or so on and ask for a god's intervention in a certain matter. So for example, if you fancied someone and you wanted to marry them, you'd make offerings to Aphrodite to make them more attracted to you. If you were ill, you would probably go and spend your time in an Asclepion and make offerings to Asclepius, the Greek god of health and medicine. If you were going to war, you'd definitely be wanting to make offerings to Ares, Not that you thought he was actually going to turn up on the battlefield, but hopefully you would get some of his strength to be able to defeat your enemies. So now to put this idea of Greek religion, Greek gods and mythology into some kind of context we've already seen, and to give it some kind of grounding, we're going to look back at the Iliad, the story of the Trojan War. And on the sheet you have with you, let me just find out what it's called. It is called Iliad Introduction. Sorry, it's pretty obvious. On your sheet Iliad Introduction you have effectively the opening passage of the Iliad. Now on the screen in front of you, you should be able to see 4 quick questions. The first one is that these are the things we want you to look for, sorry. How Homer says the gods changed the outcome of the Trojan War, why the gods decided to get involved in the affairs of men, what can we learn about the passage about the character and behaviour of the gods, and what can we learn from this passage about what the Greeks believed about human destiny? Because this is a very common theme with all religions, this idea of destiny and where things are going, and what happens ultimately to your life. So the Greeks were very aware of this, and as you can see from that question, religion and the various gods in Greece's case had quite a significant role to play in this. So if you can read the extract, pause this video while you're doing this, and pick out these 4 things that we're asking you to look for, and this is one of the things I want you to submit to Google. This is the main thing I want you to submit to Google Classroom. Your evidence of how Homer says the gods changed the outcome, and so on. And last but not least, it's quite an important task. It's really important in terms of what you'll need to do next year. This idea of second order concept skills, in this case looking at similarity and difference. And again, I don't mind how you do this, but I do want you to upload this back to the Google Classroom. What I want you to do is I want you to make 2 lists of similarities and differences between ancient Greek religion and modern religions. Now this can be done as bullet points, but some of it may need expanding. You may need to go back through and have another listen. I've alluded to some points already, so we've talked about things like destiny, we've talked about festivals, these are very similar. We've talked about the creation, so there's lots of similarities, but there's some really obvious striking differences. Now because we're saying 2 modern religions, can you specify which religion you're finding a similarity and difference with? Because you may find, and this would be more of an extension task, you may find that ancient Greek religion is more similar to some religions than others. So do the similarities and difference chart, submit this also back into Google Classroom, and until next week, goodbye.